Welcome back. Another episode of Black Guys on White Movies. I'm your host, Aaron Covington, along with,
co-host Aman Adumer.
and this week, a special new guest, good friend, comedian, writer, stand-up, improviser, actor, multi-hyphenate, the homie. Go ahead.
A lot of hyphens. What's up, y'all? Londale Hines Theus Jr.
Full government.
Full government. You getting it all. I'm about to drop the socials. Stay tuned. I'm gonna drop the socials at the end. Stay tuned.
Oh yeah.
I ain't talking tags. I'm talking 9-digit government security, man. I'm hooking it up. I'm giving away the cheat codes.
Dropping the socials, securities. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
Hack me. Come on. And this week, movie wise, what we're doing is The Apartment, 1960. Really a cinema classic. Like if you study cinema or go to film school or check out any list, you know, The Apartment is somewhere on there. It's directed by Billy Wilder, who's a legendary writer-director, especially in the comedy space, comedy-wise. It has Jack Lemmon, Lemon with 2 M's.
Yeah, 2 M's.
Shirley MacLaine and Fred McMurray, who were 3 big names at the time. I mean, Jack Lemmon was still doing movies in the 90s as an old man. That was My Fellow Americans was a really funny movie where him and Walter Matthau were former presidents.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, this was from like 95 maybe. They were former presidents, so they had like secret service and stuff, and then they decided, I think, to run again for the presidency.
So 2 old dudes deciding to run again for presidency. Yeah. That's relevant. That's real relevant.
And now that's like what we face with.
Yeah, that's our world.
Truly. Testing the age limit now. I mean, there is no age limit, but we keep pushing it. We keep pushing
it.
You're gonna have a 100-year-old president by 2040, you know. But this movie, so the reason I was like movie wise or that kind of thing, that's like a recurring joke in this movie.
Right.
Like a it's not a specific joke, it's just using that. It's like, well, what are you doing? It's like, well, I'm gonna eat a burger, food wise.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
They would like throw that around a lot in the movie. It was like almost like a catchphrase kind of thing. Let me read the synopsis and then we'll get into it and do the Black Movie of the Week and stuff. Synopsis. A Manhattan insurance clerk tries to rise in his company by letting his hold on. I got tongue tied for some reason. A Manhattan insurance clerk tries to rise in his company by letting its executives use his apartment for trysts, but complications and a romance of his own ensue. That's pretty accurate. So he's an insurance clerk in a big downtown high-rise building. And he lets the executives use his apartment with their mistresses.
Yeah.
And the way they frame it here is he's doing it to climb the ladder. But from watching the movie, I really felt like he just kind of fell into it and being a good guy and wanting to get along.
Right.
Is what happened. And then he does end up climbing the ladder because of it by the end of the movie, but it seemed like he just kind of got roped into it and was like, I'm one of the guys, I'm a good guy, and it's no big deal. You know, I live by myself. It's no big deal. You know, he was just kind of a doormat in a sense.
Essentially, that's a big thing. He's a beta and he's a doormat. That was like his big kind of character, I think, persona in the movie. And I think at one point they did kind of do the backstory of like, how'd you fall into it? And it did feel like, oh yeah, I'm a good guy. I just wanted to, you know, help people out. But then at the top of the movie, I felt like he was continuing to deal with the increasingly problematic and difficult situations by that kind of carrot they were dangling of corporate climbing. Because the opening premise, I was like, what? Like, what is happening? Like,
Right.
like what world is this? I didn't even know this was a thing. Like, it felt like a premise that wasn't fully grounded, but I just had to kind of buy into like, okay, this is just what people do.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, why is he putting up with this? This is insane. You know?
Right, right. No, 100%. It was he, I think, just has a great apartment location wise. And, and so all these people who want to cheat on their wives just go to his apartment to do it because it's just cheaper and closer and they can just go home like it's no problem.
Mhm.
But you're right. It was kind of like a not really a grounded premise.
Yeah, yeah.
It's almost like he created a potential Airbnb out of his apartment space.
It was
Yeah.
early,
That was early Airbnb. Like
early Airbnb.
he was on top of it, except he wasn't making money. He was
He's making nut. He was provided. My man was like, they were like, hey, by the way, you need some more alcohol. And this man was providing out of his own pocket,
mm-hmm.
having to
Yep.
sleep in Central Park when he had a cold because, some of the executive needed some little side action.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is insane.
And he's going upstairs and cleaning up after him too.
Yeah.
Where he's like, oh, okay. They're not doing the laundry. They're not doing it. He's going right back into the bed that some executive
Oh
Creamed in.
creamed in. It's crazy. It's pretty wild.
Did
Well,
you peep? Mhm.
Go ahead.
Well, did you peep like in terms of like the apartment, one of the opening things, he was like, yeah, I pay $85 a month. I said, $85 a month next to Central Park? This is
right.
This is insane.
It's a different time period.
And it's a big apartment too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He does say when he's explaining his job at one point, his take-home pay is $94.70 a week. So 1 week's pay does equal one month's rent, which is good math.
Yeah. That's 25% essentially. You're paying 25% of your income to rent, which is a decent,
Yeah.
The idea that 60 years ago, less than $100 a week was good.
Yeah. I'm straight.
Is I'm jealous,
Yeah.
I want
Yeah. 100%. But it makes sense why they could pay such cheap rent back in the days because they didn't have AC, they didn't have heat, they didn't have cars, there's like no amenities. You're just living close to your work. You know what I mean?
That's true. Especially in New York, everyone's taking taxis or the subway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, I get the expenses, but still it was so cheap.
For the you guys brought a lot up and I want to get to most of it, but I want to do the Black movie of the week first. And it's not really a Black movie, but this character just made me think of Sidney Poitier so much. And if this was like a Black version at the time, I mean, of course, Sidney probably would have been the lead, right? But anyway, I chose the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner from 1967.
Oh yeah.
And that's when Sidney Poitier and Katharine Hepburn were a couple, but she hadn't told her parents. So when she showed up to dinner with tall Black Sidney Poitier, it definitely ruffled some feathers, and the family had to deal with it. And it was kind of a light comedy with some heavy themes, similar to this movie, and definitely another cinema classic, worth watching. There's been a number of remakes. Bernie Mac and Ashton Kutcher made a remake.
Oh yeah.
There's probably been 3 or 4 others. Like it's pretty.
Yeah. That new Kenya Barris movie is very similar, right?
Oh yeah. What's it called?
You People.
You People.
Mm-hmm.
Basically the same premise.
Same premise, yeah. Well, what was interesting about that movie, like you said, is I do feel like when I saw this movie, tone-wise, I'm like, they don't make movies this tone really anymore, in the sense of there was a little bit of like satire and farce and comedy, but it was also pretty tense and not really feel good.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you think about the original Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, I remember watching that and being like, yeah, there's some funny bits in here, but this is pretty dramatic.
It's pretty dramatic. Funny thing about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, until the movie was released in like December, interracial marriage was still illegal until 6 months before the film's release
Dang, 6
in
months
Wow.
before the
1967.
film's release, it was illegal. So they shot it while it was still illegal.
It was being made and it was
Yeah.
still illegal to have interracial marriage in 17 states.
Wow. That's
So,
wild.
That's amazing.
Crazy.
Just to think about how bold then to make a movie like that at that time, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
what is illegal in what, a third of the states now that people are making movies about? I mean,
Right.
I guess abortion.
Yeah,
Hell,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Now
But it
that
wasn't
it's-
even, it was,
I
not
feel like
only
it was
was it
more
illegal,
tense.
yeah, it was more tense. Not only was it illegal, it was like, I mean, the Civil Rights Act was just 3 years before.
Yeah.
So black people didn't even
Mhm.
have rights across the board, not to mention like just racism that existed, and
Yeah.
Right.
I was gonna say weed, but there's no comparison to like
Doesn't
Nah.
being
Yeah.
black to like smoking weed.
No.
Nah.
Yeah,
But
man, I know what it's like to be black. I hit a couple blunts before. Yeah.
oh wow.
I know what y'all go through. Yeah, a lot of anxiety. I know what you go through. You're hungry a lot. Yeah.
That's
That's a
it.
black experience.
Yeah,
That's a black experience. You're hungry and you get dry mouth every once in a while. I get it.
and that is hard to deal with. So I understand. But yeah, the tone is interesting because if this movie were like made today, like the premise,
Mhm.
this is 100% like indie dramedy, Sundance.
Yeah.
Like it has a different tone, and they really would not let you escape the intensity of attempted suicide. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, there was yeah.
It's not quite a throwaway in this movie, but because like when she's at the apartment, and we'll go through the plot a little later, like that's the whole rest of the movie is them trying to deal with it. But if you think about it now, it's like we don't in this movie we don't see her like take the pills. We don't see there's a lot of like things they don't show us
Mhm.
where they would indulge in that today. You like
Mhm.
see her crying with a ball. She'd find the pills in the medicine cabinet and be shaking, and she'd
Mhm.
go and some sad music would be playing, sad indie music,
Mhm.
acoustic music would be playing,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and then she would take them and have a flashback to
When
being
her
rejected as a child or
when her
something.
dad touched her when she was younger.
Of,
And
of
so it's
course,
just something awful.
it would all be
Mhm.
based in that. But the thing you brought up about this movie like being kind of heightened or not grounded is like in these old movies, and it really helps put a lot of things in perspective about today in the social media era. But if you watch old movies from the 60s and before, really, or even the 70s and before, there's always really weird things like this that happen, or people's personality traits, and not having a list of it, but the idea of like not quite the seedy underbelly, but the undercurrent of society, and people are like living in strange ways or have odd relationships, or if it's a big family, it's like, who lives here? That's not even a family member, but it's like an old like these kind of
Mhm.
all the varieties of humanity, they really
Mm.
weren't afraid to show in these old movies.
Yeah.
But as things kind of are like become more modern and more things become taboo, it's like movies are so straightforward now that people don't have like any weird or interesting like quirks or anything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
even in her backstory, which I kind of only vaguely remember, but she was like, this kind of thing had happened to her before.
Mhm.
She was from somewhere else,
Right.
but she lived in New York with her sister and brother-in-law. Like all of it was just a little odd.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then Sheldrake, her boss, he had done this multiple times before and told all the women the same
Mhm.
story. And that part of it kind of still holds up today. That's still a
Mhm.
story that you tell
Mhm.
about executives and stuff. But yeah, watch old movies and just like catalog how weird people's lives are. And then when you look today, the other point I was making is that like what you see today is more like normalized, But if you when you talk to people, or especially if you go into like smaller cities and ask people what's going on, you really see that just still exists today. People are still living weird ways. It's just like less talked about, or less. It's definitely not depicted in movies and TV. In movies and TV, everybody's pretty normal
Mhm.
on a
Right.
on a scale within a spectrum. But in old movies, it was like there was no spectrum. It was just like, this is this
Mhm.
person, and own parrots, but they also do something weird and like
Yeah.
hang out underneath a Mons Golden Gate Bridge behind them or something. It's just something
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
strange. Even when we watched like Dirty Harry, it was like, what's going on here? Why are,
Yeah, yeah.
like,
Right.
why are some of
Right.
these things happening? It's just
Yeah.
accounting for the variances of human life. And now movies are like so distilled that you lose some of that variety.
You know, it's interesting in like, in terms of like improv principles. One is like when you find the comedic idea, the game, try to support all your moves towards that and don't do an extra thing that's extra unusual that kind of does a tangent away from that.
Mhm.
And I feel
Yeah.
like real life is kind of like that. Like there's going to be these weird variances and tangents, but I feel like you said in movies and TV and film, they try to have that rule of like, okay, here's the story, here's the thing we're trying to explore, here's the main arc. Everything is going to support that. And we don't want any weird, like, side auntie that has something too weird where it kind of distracts the audience away from the main story,
Yeah.
which I
Mhm.
do feel like sometimes these old movies do. You're like, wait, hold on, what is happening? What is going on with this?
Yeah.
I feel like it's more authentic to real life, but I feel like movies and TV, they don't want to show that because they might feel it's too distracting or too
Yeah.
Right.
strange.
Right. Or like even in if the writers or the creators have like in their best interest, they want to show different parts of humanity and they want to do all this stuff. I bet it just gets noted out of them. Like
Yeah.
this isn't about that side character with the wonky eye, right? Who thinks that, they slept with Katharine Hepburn or whatever it is. This is about whatever. What's this story about? It's supposed to be about this, and all of it's supposed to be focused in this way. And I think the some of the movies that do it nowadays where they have like interesting side characters, well, I think Europe has a lot of that still, like stuff that we import from Britain, and like all these actors who even just look like regular people, or
Mhm.
and that makes it unique where you're like, whoa, this doesn't, not every background extra looks the same, not every main character looks like an American version of a Marvel character.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
we import all their stuff and then just Americafy it and turn it
Well,
into like whatever
I do
version we
think
can do.
that with the birth of the internet and post 90s, because the 90s still had a lot of whimsy and randomness in the movies, but it kind of started then. And then in the internet era, people could look up, how do I become a screenwriter? You could Google that. And audiences became more savvy, and everybody, even like execs and people, started reading these screenwriting books. And it became less of a, what we would call it, creative output, and more almost like a science.
Mhm.
And then when you make
Mhm.
it so technical, you leave little room for flourishes, you know? And, execs would say, audiences don't want that, but they do. These are classic movies.
Mhm.
Audiences clearly want it. Um, but execs who have to pass things up the line, everything has to be explained. And if something's just random there, it's harder to explain. You can't just say, it's funny. You're like, well,
Mhm.
okay, the movie's a comedy, so it's all funny. We don't need to, and everybody's saying they don't need, and they put more energy and time and money just into the direct plot. So the set pieces become bigger and more outlandish, but some of the color, some of the ambiance kind of gets lost, I think.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And then when things became more televised, in the sense of like TV having like movie quality programming, even comedies, even half hours, instead of a side character being just like a funny bit or something, now they had to have like their own special episode. Remember that kind of
Yeah,
thing?
yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah.
gonna follow them a whole episode now. They got a whole storyline, and
Mhm.
everybody has to be counted. And also, as a way that we mentioned on this pod before, instead of just making more programs with different people, it's like we give a character an episode or a bigger storyline, and that'll shut up all the minorities basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, but also we're saying global majority now,
Global majority, yeah. That's
not
what
minorities.
certain circles are saying.
That's
Oh, are
what
we
we're
saying this now?
That's what certain. I'm learning this from my wife because she's she works in a lot of those spaces that are very
Yeah.
forward, activist, progressive, and
Mhm.
she went to a global majority intimacy coordinating conference. And I was like, "What's
Whoa.
global majority?" I'm like, "That's the word that we
That's what
use
we're
in
using now.
my brother
Yeah.
to show that we are not minorities because in the global sense we are the majority."
Mhm.
Sure.
That's dope. That's dope. Global majority.
So this movie is really, really interesting as a cultural kind of starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we get into the movie. He introduces us to like his job and his situation, where he's
Mhm.
booking the executives at his apartment different nights of the week and finding ways to like waste time so that he doesn't have to go home when they call. They're like, "Hey man, let me get in there tonight. I need to get in there tonight." He's like, "What, tonight? Mr. So and so has tonight. I can't let you in tonight." He
Mhm.
called Mr. So and so. "Can you do Thursday?" And he has to make these like string of phone calls to get to open up the night for another exec, that kind of thing. It's a good bit to
Mm-hmm.
show us how he's like really overextending himself
Yeah.
working his apartment.
Mhm.
He gets on the elevator, and we're introduced to Fran Kubelik. They say her last name a lot in this movie, but
They
it's
do.
not
Mhm.
easy
Mhm.
one to say, Miss Kubelik. And he had like a super crush on her, like not even hiding it. It's kind of inappropriate.
I'm saying like in this Me Too era, we look back like, okay, bro, it's
Mhm.
getting in harassment territory.
Oh, for sure. But it's totally on the range and spectrum because the other dude is like
Yeah.
pinching her ass.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this guy is just like, I really like you. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, she's being harassed in this office space by everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah,
Everybody.
let's talk about that for a sec, because this office has like probably a lot of offices were like this, but it's definitely a metaphor for the time of like,
Yeah.
and you mentioned him being a beta before, and it was definitely like this office fits into today. Like all
Yeah,
these
yeah.
guys are like
Mhm.
consider themselves alphas, especially the executive. That's what that's what they would be today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, we're living a life for executive washroom, and
Mm-hmm.
we have our mistresses or whatever. And at work, every woman that works there is young, pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Every woman that works here is a secretary or works the elevator, not any important job or
Mhm.
running the phone lines.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you have the executives in their offices, and then the betas or the young males and
Yeah.
the guys that aren't as capable, or they don't even have cubicles. This is before cubicles, so they're just desks lined up
Yeah.
Yeah.
next to each other.
And a
Right.
huge bullpen area.
Huge bullpen, and they're just like all day calculating insurance
Yeah.
numbers, whatever.
Mhm.
It is a very strong and specific cultural snapshot about
Yeah,
gender differences. You know what I mean? Like you said, it's
Mhm.
very clear like these are the alpha men that they are the execs. These are the beta men that kind of work underneath them and don't have any real hopes of, social ladder climbing or corporate ladder climbing. And the women work these service possessions and they're going to be harassed by all the men. And that's just normal.
constantly. Yeah,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
you were saying, when our boy Baxter is his name, CC
Yeah.
Baxter.
Mm-hmm.
When he's talking to Kubelik on the elevator, super crowded elevator, everybody's going to work at the same time, which is another thing we'll talk about, like the modern day workforce in a second. He's talking to her like, "You want to go out sometime?" She's like, "Well, no." She's kind of like playing it off.
Mm-hmm.
We find out later because she's having an affair with the boss.
Yeah.
Mhm.
As soon as he gets off, the executive behind like smacks her butt on the way out. And she's
Yeah.
Yep.
"Watch yourself," or doesn't even say anything. She's
She's
has
just
to go along with
fresh.
it. Yeah.
She's just
Mhm.
like, hey there,
Yeah. Yeah.
having
She
having a comedic banter back and forth.
Right.
Because she's aware of her position. She can't.
It's
What can
very
she say? She
it's
can't.
very in the society at the time. And then so
Right.
when the guys bring their mistresses to the apartment, like the mistresses are all like depicted in this movie like not substantial.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's um um what you know, these girls are
Well, you know the character's Jennifer
bluesy type
Coolidge.
girl. Oh, that
Yeah.
was Jennifer Coolidge?
Well, you know why I say that is because the first guy's like, "Hey, I got this broad who looks like Marilyn Monroe here,"
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and you hear her talk, and she's kind of drunk. She's like, "Hey there," honey." She sounded exactly like all of Jennifer Coolidge's characters, like
She
the
does.
main persona.
Yeah.
And I was
Right.
like, "Oh snap!" So like, this is she kind of fits in that archetype of character. It's just kind of
Mhm.
the hot floozy one, but just kind of
Bluesy,
dumb
yeah.
and
Yeah.
weird.
So like
Yeah.
none of these execs, like all these execs are cheating with women that, you know, are depicted in the movie or like in society at the time as like easy kind of party girls, kind of bimbos, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And this movie also is like a forefather of showing you that men hate women.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
True.
what example from the movie? The guy gets out of the cab with the woman at the apartment. He's holding like alcohol or like flowers or something. He tells her to grab his wallet.
Mhm.
She does to pay the cabbie, which is only like 15 cents or something. Everything is so cheap in this movie. And then he's like, "Put it back, sweetheart," about the wallet. Like as if she's like about to rip
Yeah.
him off. The way he says it, he's like, "Put it back, sweetheart. Don't get any ideas." Like then
Mhm.
later at the end of the movie, did I write this? I hope I wrote this down here. But when Baxter is talking to Sheldrake about Kubelik, and oh no, when Sheldrake, the big boss, is talking to Kubelik at the apartment, right? And he says something that really like he's like, you know, I had to get back to my family, like really puts her in her place, and then
Mhm.
offers her like $100, and then she's like makes a comment about it for herself, like, "This is how you see me, you know, $100 for a good time. Let's get to it." He's like, "Don't talk about yourself like that."
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like he's putting her down, but when she says it, it's like, now you're being unladylike, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
right
Yeah.
how I'm treating you, and I try to give you $100.
Yo, the
Christmas
gaslighting is
gift.
bananas in this movie.
Oh
It's
my God. It's like top
insane.
tier. It's like Jedi mind tricks.
Well, what's interesting is I couldn't quite like when I'm first watching the movie, I'm trying to figure out, I couldn't quite figure out, is this a critique of the filmmakers on this type of culture? Or is this like, do they think this is just the world? Here's like an interesting story within this world. I couldn't tell how much they supported or normalized this behavior or just like really critiquing this behavior. I think later on I
Mhm.
realized they're like critiquing it,
Yeah,
but
right.
it's
That's
def
the thing. At first, you're like, "Dang," but then later you realize, oh, they are making a commentary. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I feel like in the 60s, this was like a very progressive movie in the sense of like Shirley MacLaine's character. Kubelik is supposed to be like, this is a women's point of view on what women have to go through and da da da. But I feel like nowadays we'd be like, nah, bro, this ain't progressive at
No,
all.
not at all.
Like they,
Yeah.
yeah,
She,
like
Mhm.
yeah, you go with you.
Yeah, she didn't have agency until
Yeah,
the final minute where she was like, you know what? After all this abuse, I think I'm going to go to the good guy.
yeah, yeah.
Like the whole time she was just like floating around being used and abused by this guy who's misleading her. But yeah.
And they said
yeah,
they actually set her up in like I think the first few scenes of like, okay, this is a woman who knows herself, who is standing kind of firm within this world, but being polite about it. But she's not stupid or not,
Mhm.
I guess, taken advantage of. And then it kind of turned for me when, we found out she's with Sheldrake, and then she even knows like she just continues to fall for him and be in love with him.
yeah.
That
Mhm.
kind of turned for me because I'm like, oh wow, I didn't think she was like that. I thought we kind of started off with her being like, listen, you're not going to leave your wife. I don't
Mhm.
believe you.
Right,
Let's just end
right.
this. And then it kind of went
Right.
backwards
Yeah.
into being
Yeah.
hopeless for him. I'm like, whoa, that's
When she said
interesting.
like Yeah, she mentioned it a few times when she was talking with Baxter at the apartment. She was like, I'm in love with him. And she said that it was like, oh, okay. She just falls hard. This is, she falls
Mhm.
hard.
Yeah.
So in the part of the movie, basically, just to get people up to speed, Baxter loves Kubelik. And but Baxter is doing this apartment thing and he gets sick. So he has to cancel on some people. But anyway, it leads to the boss, who is Sheldrake, finding out about the apartment thing and persuading, using his
Mhm.
influence to get Baxter to give him the key to the apartment. He's like, hey man, I heard about this apartment thing.
Mhm. They
Baxter
had a
thinks he's,
good little reveal too, or like turn in that scene that was nice.
yeah,
Mhm.
because Baxter was like, oh, I'll stop it. I don't,
Yeah, yeah,
think he's gonna get in trouble. And
yeah,
Sheldrake's like,
yeah,
I think you know what I mean, more,
yeah,
or less.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So he gives him the key, and it was funny because he doesn't know that the boss's mistress is Kubelik. So he asks
Mhm.
her to a play, and Sheldrake gives him tickets to a Broadway play. He's like, why don't you go do this while I use the apartment, basically. So he
Mhm.
invites Kubelik. He's waiting for her, and she doesn't show. At the house, this is like Christmas, right?
Oh, at the end when it's like,
Well, no, at the end is New Year's, but I'll skip ahead a little bit.
Mhm.
This isn't a recap, so you guys are watching. But
right.
on Christmas night, Sheldrake is has the apartment with Kubelik.
Mhm.
And that's when he's like, I got to get home to my kids. I got to trim the tree. Or maybe it's like Christmas Eve or something. It's like
Christmas
the day
Eve,
or two
yeah.
before Christmas. Yeah.
Mhm.
I get home and trim the tree. And she's, he's basically like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm not actually leaving my wife. That's going to take a long time. And he's like, you'll be all right. And he leaves and she's like, I'm going to stay and clean up. Cut to Baxter comes back home and she's on the bed, passed out. She's overdosed on sleeping pills.
Mhm.
So that really sets up like the majority of the middle of the movie. Like he calls his neighbor who's a doctor, and they like
Mhm.
nurse her back, and she stays there a night or two. I can't remember exactly how long, but just to make sure she's gonna like live and be okay. And Baxter's kind of freaking out and everything. And then it just comes to a head. Somebody else tries to use the apartment. He's like, you can't. But they see that Fran is there, so word kind of gets around a little bit.
Mhm.
But the whole time Baxter's being a good guy, but he also never drops the lie to like his
Yeah,
neighbors,
yeah, yeah.
which is really funny. So his neighbors think he's like some playboy who brings all these girls to the
Mhm.
apartment. And they're like, it's so noisy and you're always all hosting.
Mhm.
He's like,
Yeah.
well, you know me, I'm kind of a ladies' man. I can't
Yeah,
get
yeah.
enough.
I'm kind of a sex pot. I'm a sex pot. You know?
It's got to be like the ego to be like, hey, I can. It's not me, but I'll take credit for anything that's not, pinned down. I'll take credit for that.
There's also an element of I feel like this is a white man's fantasy. You know what I mean? Like even though they're
Yeah,
critiquing this culture, I do feel like they're kind of fantasizing of like, listen, all of these execs are old
100%.
white dudes who
Yeah,
are
Mhm.
clapping cheeks with these young things.
Mhm.
And the neighbors are like, it's going. First of all, the neighbors are very Jewish, I think on purpose. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
for
Like
sure.
Mhm.
they
For sure.
really lean into like, listen, we hear it all night. What is happening?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
And I
100%.
couldn't tell. I'm like, oh, is that just them trying to like give Jewish actors nice roles, or is it stereotyping? I couldn't tell.
Yeah, I don't
But
know.
anyway, it was like they were telling these stories as if, first of all, these old dudes ain't laying pipe like that. This is pre-Viagra. They ain't going all night long.
It's so true.
Being these
Especially after drinking all night. Yeah, there's no
exactly.
way. There's no way.
So just painting these old white dudes just like
Mhm.
tearing it up all night long.
Well, that's also funny because
Crazy.
like the one time when the boss went there, he was like, I'll be done it by 8. It's like you get off at 5 or 6.
Uh-huh.
Like these are
Right.
really just sex appointments.
Truly. And the time on the phone where the guy calls and the Marilyn Monroe type is
Uh-huh.
there.
Yeah.
And he goes, come on, Baxter, just give me 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And then she comes in and says her thing. He goes, all right, take it down to 35. I'm like, damn, those are still Olympic numbers you're putting up there.
There was no romance going on at the apartment in the apartment.
No.
The, the other thing this movie is really shows, and is like how modernization isolated people, especially men at the time. And I think this is something that we're still dealing with today. I don't know if you guys heard the story recently. There was a trans man who was like, now that I'm a man, life is so much lonelier.
Interesting.
It was
Mhm.
like, this person was like, I don't necessarily regret the transition, but since I've fully transitioned, I feel like I've been depressed because being a man is such a lonely existence, and being a white man.
Hmm.
And that is
Huh.
definitely something culturally that when we talk about whiteness, and we talked about it before, where it's like taking a race society, it's also very much about isolation,
Hmm.
and it's also about like, well, you get a job, you move away from your family for that job. And if the job requires you to move again, you keep moving. And all these things breed more isolation. Like the only person that didn't feel completely like isolated and on their own was his neighbor, the doctor,
Hmm.
who was married with his wife and actually had like, as much as we could see in the movie, a decent enough relationship. But
Yeah.
all these men were cheating
Mhm.
were like, you could
Mhm.
tell it's like extreme loneliness.
Hmm.
This is the only
Yeah.
thing that gets them like their kicks. They don't like their families, so they either
Hmm.
work late or lie about working late to have these mistresses.
Hmm.
Mistresses don't have families or anybody to go home to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sheldrake like
Right.
lives with her sister and brother-in-law. She's a hopeless romantic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Baxter, of course, is the ultimate bachelor, living at home, doesn't even have like amenities. He's making spaghetti with a tennis racket.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is funny
So
because it's like he has a nice apartment, like really nice, and then there's bits of like, oh yeah, you gotta do the you gotta do the lighter with the gas thing. It doesn't
Mhm.
automatically turn on. Oh, you're making it with the
right.
tennis racket. He's doing all
Mhm.
these like almost like low income hacks, but you got a
Yeah.
Yeah.
good life.
Yeah.
And the fact that he kept mentioning like he's alone, he doesn't have a girlfriend relationship, doesn't have family. He mentioned at one point, he
Yeah.
literally
Mhm.
has no friends. He has nobody.
Right. In the biggest city probably in the world at that time, right? New
Yeah.
York, in the middle
Yeah.
of Manhattan near Central
They
Park.
even mentioned the number. There's right now in 1960 New York, there's 8 million something.
Yeah. And on the point you were making, Aaron, about the only guy who didn't seem to have that is the neighbor. They when Baxter goes to the neighbors to try to help with Kubelik, and the wife opens the door and she goes, "Wow, you're doing all this, this, and this. Yeah,
Mhm.
my husband tells me everything."
Mhm.
And it's
And they were
like,
Jewish, so not like
right. And so
the
it's like,
ideal
oh,
kind of whiteness.
no, it's a different kind of,
It's a
yeah,
very, yeah,
100%. And so
it's a
there's the
different.
closeness that he has in that relationship that no one else in the movie has.
Mhm.
Which I think that's a spot on about the loneliness that comes from that.
I mean, even the Christmas Eve thing where he finds out, Kubelik is the woman, the mistress, so he's kind of depressed and he goes out drinking, and it's Christmas Eve where everyone is supposed to be with somebody and he's lonely, and then the other woman's lonely. Just kind of
Mhm.
Yeah.
has, just the loneliness.
True, true. They close the bar out together and Santa's
Yeah.
there. Even
Yeah.
Santa's lonely.
Even Santa's lonely.
On Christmas Eve, the busiest day.
And it's funny, like the insurance company is like Christmas, so everybody lets loose and has a wild party. And that's really what companies do. It's like, we're gonna make you do this, work in an office, isolate,
Hmm.
but we'll give you this party at Christmas and you
Yeah.
can go
We'll
wild.
give
And
you.
you
Right.
know what that is? You know who else did that? Slave owners.
Oh yeah,
Mm,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Slave, enslaved people would get Christmas to New Year, that last week of the year, basically off.
yeah,
That would be their time to like let loose and party.
yeah,
wow.
And then come New Year's Day, day after New Year's, is like back to work.
yeah,
That is a documented thing.
yeah.
Wow.
There's an area in New Orleans, I think, called the Congo Square. I don't know if it's specifically in New Orleans, but it is called the Congo Square. And that was the thing where two different enslaved people from different plantations, they would give them a
Mhm.
certain date. It was either a certain day of the week or a certain day of the month, but they would allow them to congregate at one place and just play, dance, do music, just have their free time. But yeah, it's like This is the only time you get.
Right. Don't say we didn't give you nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Wow.
So much of this movie, I like you see reflected today, which also actually I did want to talk about this. So modernization led to like 9 to 5 and like assembly line work, and people act, oh, Henry Ford invented the assembly line. It's like, no, he marketed the assembly line.
Yeah.
People understood how to work in order and do specific jobs before cars. You got to understand like just human thinking and human history. Like efficiency existed before Henry Ford, but it didn't exist on that scale. And he marketed it as the founder, and we know that he wasn't like this great guy, just a businessman. So what people forget, and this movie was 1960, so the generation that includes like baby boomers, is how unique that was in human history. And now we have this like work from home crisis, and they were like, get back to the office. But that stuff is all a very small part of human history. Having like an office and 9 to 5, I mean, we created the 5-day work week. We created 9 to 5 hours. And yeah, some people work more and some people work less. It's a different society's, history. But like people generally worked where they live. Even when we had buildings and you'd like old America, 1800s, or England, 1900s, it was like, if you owned a shop, you lived upstairs. Didn't travel 15, 20 minutes or miles into town to work,
Right.
Like all of that is new. So it made me think like this, the work from home craze is actually like humanity righting itself to more towards its natural order.
Yeah.
Because the big cities and the suburbs, these things are all like newer concepts.
Yeah.
And
newer concepts that were invented not for the flourishment of people, but for the flourishment of labor and output and production, which can only go, as everyone talks about late stage capitalism, like, yeah, early stages, it creates a lot of innovation. But when you get to the late stages, there's so much exploitation and lack of humanity. There's going to be some pushback, and there's going to be some type of crumbling of it because, people can't sustain that.
Exactly. It's just so unnatural, and it's unnatural for us to be so isolated and to, lead these lives so separate from like family and from like friends, and obviously something like COVID really wrecks everything because we all ended up being so isolated during that time, one way or another, and things you could or couldn't do, even in cities where they didn't, like, we're in LA, so it was like really like it was more strict than a lot of other cities, but even in those cities you couldn't like travel like you wanted to. There were things that restricted it, and I actually think it was kind of a humanity wake-up call to be like, oh, when tragedy struck, look how far we had to be from each other because we live so far from each other, not just in distance, but also just in habits. And I think that is slowly going back to like historical precedents instead of, the post-World War II economic modernization technology boom that was like, oh, you don't need to live with anybody, studio apartment, and have your TV, and later have your TV and phone, and now have the internet, and you don't really need people,
And it wasn't during the COVID thing, it wasn't the idea of I miss being at work with people, that people were willing to break guidelines for. It was I feel alone and I'd rather risk it by going to hang out with friends or attempting to date, create like these partnerships, and I'm willing to risk it. Those are the ones that I remember. People being like, I've never seen so many people get on those dating apps, but it was COVID and people were just like, I need humanity. I need a connection.
Looking for friendship.
Please swipe right for having a good connected friendship.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the societal, not even problem, but there's always societal problems, but the tensions that we see today reflected in different attitudes, like the alpha beta kind of mentality, and like, we see how much men have organized around hating women nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
especially on social medias and stuff. You can see it in this movie. The birth of it
Yeah.
is the culture that created this movie, whether even though it's a satire, like the things they were making fun of still exist and now have just
Mhm.
grown in intensity.
It's interesting because like even there's part of it that is critiques, and then I think there's part of it where they think they're just moving story forward. But as me, I'm like, that's a really problematic thing that's not even being addressed. So like I remember it was even the main character. We're supposed to kind of like the main character, even though we know he has some flaws.
Mm-hmm.
But he keeps pushing up on Kubelik,
Mhm.
and I'm like, dude, this is not uncomfortable. And she's not really calling him out. And you could say like,
I'm glad you said
oh,
this, man.
I mean,
Yeah.
the fact that he says, "Oh, you live in da da da," she's like, "How do you know where I live?"
Yeah,
Oh, I
that
know
was
everything
bad.
about you.
Right.
I
That was
took
bad.
your insurance file. I know where you're born. I know the date you're born. I know where you live. You live with your sister and your husband, your sister's husband. I'm like, bro,
Yeah.
this is a
Not-
lawsuit.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
And I can tell it was that scene was made to be kind of like a charming little, this is how much she likes her. And then she just blew it off. She's like, oh, okay.
Right.
And I'm like, so we're not going to talk about this?
That's so real. All she can do is like disassociate and be like, well, I have no power in this world. And even this person knows where I'm living. So I'm going to be as friendly as I can.
The thing is, I
Yeah.
feel like maybe today that's what that choice would have made. Like the director would have made that choice. Like I feel like
Mhm.
Greta Gerwig would have really made that clear.
Right.
I feel like these filmmakers just was like, isn't this it's kind of weird, but it's kind of cute. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because I couldn't even fully get that she was like, okay, I really don't have much agency or choice here, and I don't want him to
Sure.
abuse me or do anything weird, so I'm just going to go along with it. It still felt like, oh, that was kind of charming, whatever.
Well,
Mhm.
Weird.
This is a trope that continued to play out in movies, and probably I think still does. But you see it, especially in also in sitcoms. But you really see it in like high school movies,
Mm-hmm.
especially like in the '80s and after that. But this idea of like the guy who's a nerd. Let's say Baxter was basically a nerd in this.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the cool guy. He's
Yeah.
who gets a crush on a girl and like is so obsessive about it.
Mm-hmm.
And you could still see this in like a lot of high school type movies or even rom-coms or especially things where the male is the lead and he's like interested in this girl, but she's not necessarily showing him anything back, and he has to like win her over.
Right.
Even I think about the movie Along Came Polly. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
With, Ben Stiller.
Mm-hmm.
And he like loved Jennifer Aniston, and she was kind of cool on him, but she was also kind of he was like the straight laced guy, and she was like the not straight laced
She was
girl.
kind of like the manic pixie archetype in
Yeah.
that movie.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And he worked in insurance too, and he used their insurance to like rate her if she was like dateable or
Oh
not.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
he was like, what's the risk
Yeah.
versus
wow.
dating her and stuff? And it was a similar thing where it's like, and what is the cultural message it sends?
Yeah.
That if you're like kind of a nerdy dude, but you're more persistent and more, you know more about her and find a way to take what you learn about her, not that you asked about, that you found out some sneaky way,
Mm-hmm.
you can use that to manipulate her into liking you,
Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, Hitch is kind of a low key a little bit, you know what I mean?
When he takes her on that date.
Well, in the fact of the whole premise is we're gonna
The way he
learn
coaches
everything
people.
about her to
Yeah.
put you in the best
Yeah.
position. And I feel like the message was these
Yeah.
people, if we didn't have these social barriers and these kind of, hierarchies that we just are put on men and women,
Uh-huh.
these women or men, because I think he worked with both people, would already naturally be attracted to each other. But because we have these barriers, they would never even meet. So
Right.
Hitch's job is to give you all the tools necessary to break through those barriers so you can naturally find love. I feel like they tried to make a positive spin on it,
Uh-huh.
which I feel like mostly it was, but there's still that aspect of like, all right, this dude who's a normal kind of whatever dude and this high status value woman, if you
Right.
want to get her, you got to do all these essentially
Mhm.
manipulative things
Right.
to make that
Right.
connection happen.
Yeah. Which is funny because the way he ends up winning her in the apartment here is by being a mensch, a good
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
And it's funny that
Uh-huh.
they use a Jewish word there and like the
Yeah.
doctor's influence. So like everything he knows about her that he learned through his sneaky means is kind of irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
What inspires her is when he doesn't give Sheldrake the key to the apartment and quits the job. He's like, I'm not going to be that. And you know,
Yeah.
that was actually really audacious of Sheldrake to, after the suicide attempt, to be like, let me get the apartment again
Right.
with the same lady.
This dude was
Yeah.
out of pocket.
Truly, truly. But nothing in his whole existence has ever told him he's wrong. He's just like,
Nothing.
yo, okay. I'm gonna keep taking this shot because I think I'm gonna make it.
There's like almost zero accountability for whiteness in this movie,
Zero.
except when the secretary blows the whole thing up.
Yeah.
Yep.
She's the one that tells Kubelik that she was the old Miss Kubelik,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
or one of the old Miss Kubelik. She was her before her,
Mm-hmm.
and there have been others before. And she tells her like, "Oh, he'll take you to this Chinese place, which he had just taken Kubelik to."
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
she's like, "Then he'll promise you that he's going to leave his wife."
Yep.
She's like, "She did it to me. I overheard phone calls he did to other women."
She got the
And
script. Yeah, and all the things she said was the things Kubelik was experiencing.
Yep.
and then when the boss finds out, he fires her. Like
Fires her.
when they
Yep.
get back to work. On her way out, she calls the wife, and we don't see this scene either.
Yeah.
She just says, "Is this Mrs. Sheldrake?
Mm-hmm.
Let's get lunch." That's
Mhm.
what we see. And again, in a modern movie, it would have been like we would have seen the wife, and she would have been a character, and we would have had to deal with like all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, that's the modern version of the DM. Hey, girly, I know
yeah.
you don't know me, but
Yeah. But
So
but
I
when
got some
Sheldrake,
receipts.
so when Sheldrake wants to use the apartment again, it's because his wife kicked him out.
Yeah. I thought that
And
was actually like a good storytelling. I think one of the brilliant things, like overall, if I would have just watched this movie, like when I watched this movie and I saw it won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, I was actually blown away. I'm like, I didn't necessarily think this was a movie like that. Like I didn't necessarily like it, but I thought they did certain things that were like brilliant. So the setting up of kind of dramatic irony being like the characters don't know this, but we as an audience know it's these kind of mistaken identities, coincidences, escalating conflict through happenstance. I felt like they built that all very organically. So when those plot moments would happen, they would actually feel earned and they were actually really interesting. So like when the secretary dimed him out to his wife, it just happened at the time where Baxter was like, "Oh, I'm actually gonna profess my love for Kubelik, and I'm gonna tell Sheldrake because they're not together anymore, and there's no hope of them getting together. That you know what, I'm gonna be with her." And he does his whole speech, and then as soon as he gets to the office, Sheldrake does the same speech.
right.
I'm gonna take her off your hands. We're actually in love. We're gonna do this. Just because it happened that my wife and I are divorced,
Yeah.
So I thought like how they built those circumstances to get to that point and have that irony, I thought was actually really well done.
Yeah.
True.
I didn't ask you guys what you thought about the movie. Maybe we'll do that briefly, and then get into casting. We're getting about an hour here. So
Yeah.
this movie, of course, it's like problematic in its depictions, and some of it is a satire or commentary on society, but also society was troubling at that time, as it would be now if you tried to make like a realistic movie, or if you made this today. This movie won a bunch of Academy Awards, and at the time, I think it even makes more sense in the context of the time. This is 1960. This movie came out. But also, I think the construction of this movie is actually it's pretty beautiful. If you like structure of movies, if you follow like plot or first, second, third act and plan some payoffs, if you're like a screenwriter or an actor, you got to recognize like the craft of this movie. Like, it's up there. And I think for all the actors in the movie too, I think they really got a lot to do. Obviously, the three main characters, Baxter, Jack Lemmon, Fred McMurray as Sheldrake, and Shirley MacLaine, they all had a whole lot to do.
Yeah.
expressed a lot of different emotions and a lot of nuance. But also the doctor had a good part.
Yeah.
Miss
Mhm.
Olsen only had a couple scenes, but she was good at, she got to do some acting in those scenes, and the other executives got to be funny and goofy.
Mm-hmm.
The floozy women got to be like really like out there and present in their scenes. So
Mhm.
this was like an actor's movie, a
Yeah,
writers
yeah,
and an
yeah.
actor's
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
definitely. I
No.
feel like as for 1960s, we kind of have maybe a stereotype in our head of like acting wasn't as good back then. I was impressed with the acting. Just watching it on the
Mhm.
first look, I'm like, Shirley MacLaine is killing it. Jack
Yeah.
Lemmon, of course, he does what he does and he's killing it.
Mhm.
All the other actors, the character actors, they're doing funny, interesting choices. So
Yeah.
just what you're saying, it was some solid acting in this movie.
Yeah, and I think the thing we were talking about earlier, where we were going, how come a lot of modern movies don't have characters that are unique and weird? And us talking about how it doesn't necessarily focus on the plot. This was one of those things that, like, you read it as an actor and you go, oh wow, even the small parts I can make it unique and make it my own.
Yeah.
And so it's like they wrote it for actors, like a love for actors,
Mm-hmm.
which is
I,
dope.
I think Billy Wilder was kind of known for that. And, he did a couple of Marilyn Monroe's biggest hits for people trying to put him in context, like Something Like It Hot, 7 Year
Something
Itch.
like it hot. Yeah, yeah.
Last thing I have to say about the movie and like the money,
Mm-hmm.
the other thing about working in these offices and 9 to 5s, if people are paid adequately and they feel like they're getting good pay for their job, then that is something they can do. Work a 9 to 5, work at an office and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the issues today. It's like, well, inflation keeps raising, the Fed raises the rates every 2 months. People can't afford apartments, especially in bigger cities with these big downtowns. And so it's like, why are people working from home? Why are people unhappy? It's like, at least you got to pay them if you're going to make them do this.
Yeah, yeah,
This kind
yeah.
of thing.
True.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's got to be a trade-off where it
Mhm.
feels like they're getting enough value from it because the wage is stagnated and everything else is going higher.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is when they could afford things. And it was like, oh, their lives are still miserable. Like, oh, there's no connection, no
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah,
Wait 30 years and then you won't be able to afford things and your life will be more miserable. You'll see.
And I think this movie does speak to, at the time, had to be at the same time as like the birth of the sitcom, which like the ideal white family, picket fence, 2.5 kids kind of thing.
Mhm.
And this is like the opposite of that. Nobody's
Yeah,
like going home happy with their kids. I mean,
yeah.
No.
Baxter's like got to be 30 or in his early 30s or something, like still trying to get somewhere in life. And
Mhm.
it's more reflective of today than that, like Leave It to Beaver type of like idyllic
Mhm.
American ideal,
Yeah,
Mhm.
very counter to that.
Yeah.
What's interesting is I feel like the structure of the movie is something that would not be done today, in the sense of like there was a time where I'm like, okay, usually at this point in the movie, like maybe halfway through or 2/3, I'm seeing the character change and transform and kind of let go of the lie they're holding on to and start. I didn't get that really from Baxter until the last 5 minutes of the movie. And I
Yeah.
definitely didn't get it from Shirley until the last minute of the movie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it
very
was
last
really weird
minute.
because I'm like, dude, we are an hour and 45 into this movie and they're still making the wrong, quote unquote, wrong choices. And so
Right.
that was where the feel bad came for me. I'm like, I don't feel good watching this because I'm
Yeah.
seeing these people recognize that this situation is messed up and still keep doing the problematic thing until
Mhm.
the last second. The last second you get some relief. I'm like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, finally. But even then it's a misdirect where you're like,
Yeah.
oh,
it's not-
Baxter killed himself. Come
Oh
on,
yeah,
man.
now that's another thing I think they did very well too, in terms of like planning those things, telling the story about shooting himself earlier,
Yeah.
then literally the Chekhov's gun, then pulling the gun as he's packing, and then having that moment. I'm like, oh, the way they did those, they strung those pearls together in so many different instances.
Yeah.
Even with her having gas, oh, I smell gas, and she just
Right.
killed herself,
Yeah.
and she forgot to light the
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
and they show him lighting it earlier, so they set up like the plants and payoffs in this movie were like
Top notch.
top tier.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's almost more like a sports movie where like you didn't get the relief until the fourth quarter or the final
Yeah,
round. It's like,
yeah.
Mm.
And that's really what makes it like the indie movie today. It would be like, and it's not a super happy ending. It's just like,
Mm-hmm.
at least they're not still in this awful loop
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
anymore. And they
Right.
finally like recognize each other. Because even when he's like, I love you, Kubelik, or whatever at the end, she's like, deal the cards. She can't quite,
Yeah. Deal the cards.
she definitely feels something for him, but I don't know if I feel like they're going to end happily ever after and they're going to be together. But they've definitely
Right.
gone through this thing together and I guess would lean on each other to get to their next stations in life, whatever it might
Mm-hmm. I feel like she admires him more than is attracted to him.
be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. She feels safe with him.
Yeah. It
After-
admires his humanity and his ability to change.
Maybe
Mhm.
maybe he got friend zone, which it's not the worst thing. People act like friend zone is like the worst thing now. But as we said earlier, people need friends in this isolated
yeah.
world.
True. True.
I mean, he was a hella simp. He was simping
Woo.
hella hard in this movie.
Well,
yeah.
I guess that's what I wanted to say about the trope of like the nerdy guy and obsessing over the girl. And that cultural message that says is that like once you get your eyes on something, that's what you got to get.
That's
But
what she got. Yeah.
you know, we really do need to work on recognizing like beauty in more people and in more different ways,
Yes.
and understanding that like if somebody's not into you, fixating on them
Yeah.
is not the thing to do.
Yeah.
That
Mhm.
person also probably isn't a good partner for you. Like the
Yeah.
reason, find somebody you're like compatible with, and don't just try to force compatibility with somebody you're
Yeah.
obsessed with.
Yeah.
You know?
It's that entitlement and that I deserve this.
Mhm.
And the feeling that if I don't get this, then somehow society's people are against me, which I think creates this whole incel culture
Yes.
of guys who like, women won't date me and I'm entitled to them dating me.
Right.
Yeah.
I
And it's
did
like-
everything right.
Yeah. And like you said, it's like, if someone's not into you, that's not the end of the game. Like you can still have a human connection and a valuable relationship by being friends. But like you
Mhm.
said, we do put a very negative context on friend zoning when a
Mhm.
guy desires a woman romantically. And if that is not achieved, there's like, it creates this kind of toxic issue between men and how men treat women or how men view women.
And it's not a good terminology either, because when women find someone they want to be with, what do they
Mhm.
say? He's my best friend.
Yes, I know.
So by that, if you call somebody friend zone, then that should be a good thing, but it's become a bad thing. So even the terminology is like,
Yeah. We even
Mhm.
confuse. Yeah, I feel like psychologically we even confuse,
You know?
sending mixed messages.
Truly. That's yeah. I'm glad the movie ended where it ended because I think would have just been a tragedy if we continued watching their stories.
Oh my God.
title
Was it-
card at the end. Kubelik and Baxter dated for 5 months. They never saw each other again.
They
Never saw each other again.
Yeah.
She went back
He
to
was hit by a
homeboy.
car 3 years later and died anyway.
Yeah.
It was something like depressing.
Yeah, it'd be so sad.
Anyway, good movie. Let's cast.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. I didn't cast that many roles. I just cast, I think, 3 of them.
I think if you got the big three,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know, it's fine. It's fine. I still got to think about it. The lead is hard for me.
I think I got something for the lead because you know what was interesting. I was looking up because I'm looking at Jack Lemmon and I'm like, okay, he's kind of like a middle-aged, you know, maybe high 30s or early 40s. He's kind of a beta, right? He's not exactly ugly, but he's someone that we should understand the object of desire, the woman overlooks him. We should understand that.
Yeah.
And when I looked up, typed in black male actors like 40 and up, all the categories were like, here's how hot these black male actors, you know, it's Morris
Yeah.
Chestnut, it's Blair Underwood. I'm like, none of these work. But then I was thinking William Jackson Harper he's not that old, but
Yeah.
he has that vibe of like, he's not a bad looking guy. He can't be the love interest, but he can also very much play a guy that women overlook, you know, from Good Place to even him in Love Life, he kind of had a certain vibe of like that for certain women. And I'm like, I think William Jackson, he's more dramatic than Jack Lemmon.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Lemmon was 45.
45? Okay.
when this movie came out.
Okay.
So he
Yeah.
was a 45-year-old insurance pencil pusher trying to make his way up to the executive. And those guys must have been 50 or 60.
Yeah,
But in the eyes of like the modern beta male alpha kind of thing, they were all betas. Like even Sheldrake, it's like, man, you just the fact that he had to go into work and interact with coworkers is like, you're not really a modern CEO, man.
you ain't
you,
modern. You over there.
you don't got a billion. You have to
Yeah,
go into work. Come
you
on,
gotta take the
bro.
elevator with everybody else. Come
You
on,
know,
bro.
he's bum.
You ain't it. You ain't him. You are not him.
William Jackson Harper, I think is good. Amon, who you got for
That's a great choice. It was similarly, I had trouble finding. I feel like one of the hard thing about finding, like, Black actors tend to be placed in roles where they're so empowered, you know? So it was hard to try to find that kind of can play like a lowly thing. And so
yeah, like
I
a
went,
low status kind of.
yeah, like a low status kind of thing. So I went with from the show I was working on, I went with Marcus Scribner.
Oh yeah,
Oh
yeah,
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 Yeah, I figured
yeah,
he would be like a fun, like, hey, like I like
yeah,
you kind of
yeah,
thing. Younger, but I think it'll be fun.
yeah. You can pull that off.
Throw the boy in there.
I turned to social media just now.
Uh-huh.
I'm going with Kev on stage.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, he can definitely play that. And
Yeah,
he has the comedic vibe enough to pull it off too.
he's really funny, not like tall, dashing, kind of what you know,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
we always kind of see, or not super buff, just like a dude, regular
yeah,
dude.
yeah.
He would
right.
get that across. And so I'm gonna go real indie and we're gonna make it like that. That's how I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, yeah. You know
That's
who
dope.
else I think can pull it off in like maybe the late 90s was Tommy Davidson.
Oh man,
Mhm.
yeah.
He's played
Yes.
characters like that where he's not the handsome, good-looking guy, but he can still be in like relationships and stuff like that. But he's so physical and funny, and people can kind of overlook him in roles. I think he was like that in Booty Call, right? He was kind of
I think so.
overlooked
Yeah.
a little
He
bit.
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
the show
Wow.
booty call, like
Yeah,
kind of like a little hesitant, kind of like let me wait and
yeah,
see him trying to be a good guy kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
100%.
Oh yeah, that would be super dope. So what have you done for Kubelik? In Kubelik's role, for me, I was also same issue as with Bud, where I was like, man, it's hard to find just kind of like a doe-eyed Black actress who's not holding it down for the race. You know what I mean? Just someone who's
Mhm.
like not from the Viola Davis school of acting, but just someone who could just be silly and so I
Yeah,
went
yeah, yeah.
with, you get what I'm saying. I went with Megan Good.
Oh, that's the exact one I had.
No way.
Exact one
Okay.
I had.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Same reason for you? Like
Same
just
reason, because number one, I feel like she represents a certain generation of like, she is the Black romantic lead, right?
Mhm.
She's attractive. She's the object she's the object of desire, not to be like objective, but she's the person everyone looks at, like she's beautiful, she's charming, she's funny, but also she tends to play roles where she's messing around with fuckboys. I mean, let's be real.
Mhm.
Like a lot of her characters are
Yeah.
characters dealing with F boys.
Right.
And I feel like that is Kubelik's character. She's dealing with this F boy.
Yes.
And even dealing with the weirdness of Baxter at times,
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. What'd you get, Aaron?
Wait, who did you say? Oh, Megan Good. Oh yeah, because she was funny. She had a real funny turn on her show, Harlem. There's some good moments in that. That was a really good show.
Ooh, I'll have
Solid
to check
show.
that out.
This I'm gonna go with now. Gabrielle Dennis,
Oh yeah, yeah,
Gabrielle
yeah,
Black
yeah.
Lady Sketch Show.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. She's great.
I think she's real funny and real versatile. Also thought about Shashira Zamata.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
She's really blown up, and
Mm-hmm.
she's really funny stand up. I think she just had like a special I just saw
Really?
on her Instagram she was promoting. So
Oh, interesting.
Oh dope.
shout out and support. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Gabrielle Dennis
Yeah, she
on
she
Black Lady
has
Sketch Show.
Yeah, she has that versatility where she can be very, very funny,
Mhm.
but she's still been in like some more dramatic stuff. Even when she was in Insecure, her role was more of a kind of a dramatic bit.
Oh, she had an insecure turn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It wasn't huge, but she played the Sarunas Jackson, the tall brother who was dating Molly, but he
Oh,
was
that
in an
was his
open
wife.
marriage. He was his wife. Yeah,
Oh,
Uh-huh.
wow, wow. And then I'm guessing the last one has got to be Sheldrake if you got.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
I was also thinking this. What came to mind was Terrence Howard. Somebody who
Perfect.
can just
That's
play
kind
a
of perfect.
sleazy dude, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
You know, it just plus his wife like, first of all, baby, you gotta understand, I'm gonna leave my wife, all right? Why you acting like this, man? Why you try to kill yourself, man?
You ain't never gonna leave your wife, Lucius.
Put Taraji in there, making a whole empire turn.
Yeah. How did it become Empire, the movie? Like midway, like 3/4 of the way through.
Jussie Smollett is Baxter.
They,
That's his
they
breakout.
stabbing me. Nobody's out there, bro.
No one out there, man.
I'm looking.
They hanging me in the street on the ground. They hanging me. I'm being hung on the ground.
This isn't your movie, but I didn't. No.
Yeah.
You going in on. But they Chappelle called him Juicy.
Juicy,
Oh,
yeah.
I love Juicy. And then the Black Tupac. Or what did he say? No, he said he's the Black I forgot. He was claiming himself to be like the Black Jesus, the Black gay Jesus.
Oh, what?
I think it was.
Yeah, for Sheldrake, I'm on.
For Sheldrake, you said it earlier, Londale, but I was like, who's like a boss type Black actor that I want to see playing this fuckboy role? Morris Chestnut.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
It's getting real.
Ooh,
I think he could do it. I see it.
Yeah, yeah.
tough. This is tough.
You would be able to understand her dilemma too if it's Morris Chestnut. You'd be like, okay, I understand why you can't get over this dude.
100%.
If it was more Cheston at the end, you might be like, girl, just play your part.
Be a completely different vibe.
Stop rocking the boat, man.
Yeah.
Be happy to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's
She
so
ungrateful. Why is she ungrateful?
yeah, my God, if I was in her position. Just,
I really don't know for Sheldrake because like the guys I was thinking of, I feel like maybe too old.
Hmm.
And because everybody like all these Black actors that we like know and love are like in their 50s and 60s now.
Mhm.
yeah, that's true.
Like, and I think they were at the time of this movie, but everybody seems a little younger for some reason. Like find out that Jack Lemmon is 60. I mean 40,
Yeah.
45.
45 at the time of this movie. It's like, oh, it seemed like he was like a 35-year-old dude or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I want to do something like somebody that's not so well known, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
this one is tough. Kind of wanted to go with Tay Diggs.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
He's also like a shorter guy. And I
Oh,
think part
yeah,
of it is
yeah.
like Sheldrake was like a bigger dude and conveyed this kind of
Yeah.
intensity.
I think a guy that fits the the build, the presence of Sheldrake is Idris Elba.
Yeah.
Now, the
Mhm.
choice of being like an unlikable F-boy would be an interesting thing to see him try to pull off. Because I feel like he doesn't normally play those type of characters,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
So, like, I feel like his presence and his whole vibe can fit that mold. I just don't know if I want to see him as an actor do those choices. I don't know how it would go. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I feel like if you cast him, he would make this unlikable character a little likable.
Yeah,
Like he could.
yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it's just somebody like Boris Cujo.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Kajo. I don't know how to say his last
I think
name.
it's
I would say
Kojo.
Cujo. Kojo?
Boris Kojo, yeah.
Boris Kojo.
Okay. Him or Shamar Moore.
Yeah.
Kind of the usual suspects. Rick Fox, he's a little older though.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Wow, is Rick Fox acting like that?
Yeah,
He was acting for a minute. I haven't seen him in stuff for a while, but there was a
Yeah.
while where he was just like an actor.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll go with Boris for now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that
fits.
actor, and I think he's played that kind of character before too, where, you know, I think he's played something similar at some point. So I'll go with that.
Mhm.
And then the great thing about this movie, you could just fill it out with so many other Black character
Mhm.
actors or comedic actors, just like
Mhm.
as the executives or as the quote unquote floozies, or
Mhm.
the brother-in-law who comes and punches
Oh yeah,
Kid
yeah.
Baxter. Like, what'd you do to my sister's worried about her sister? I'm gonna
Yeah, yeah.
punch you in the face.
What's your idea here, huh? Who is this? Where is your guy? Bah!
Classic New York.
Mhm.
Yeah, man. So yeah, I do like watching this movie. I've seen it a few times. It's like every couple years or so, it like comes up somewhere or it's mentioned like in a tweet or something, and I'll be like, man, let me go watch The Apartment. So I've
Mhm.
seen it maybe like five times or something
I don't think
over
I've
15 years or something, you know.
Yeah, I think this was definitely the first time I've seen it. But I think the one thing that I remember seeing before, and I think it was done in like a class, in like some type of movie history class, but they're literally talking about the moment about the broken mirror, about how the device where, you know, Baxter told Sheldrake, oh, by the way, you know, your woman, whoever was there, your mistress left this broken kind of mirror at the house. Like, oh, okay, I'll give it back to her. And then soon, when he's, you know, in love with Kubelik, she's like, oh, you know, use my mirror, take a look at yourself. And he sees that it's a broken mirror. And that's when he realizes that she's the mistress. I think
Mhm.
somebody that was like presented to us in class about like how that was a brilliant device to use in order to kind of relay kind of dramatic information. That's
Mhm.
the one part I remember of like, oh, I've seen this thing before.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. I think I'd only ever seen parts of it. And it was all the uh something wise, this is wise, something wise. And that's the
Oh,
only thing I remembered from it. Um, and then the other element, like you're saying, Londale, is like I've heard that it's a great thing to learn from, like setup, payoff. So
Mhm.
many setups and payoffs. Uh, and that this came from the same guy who made Sunset Boulevard is just it's wild.
Mm. I still haven't seen
Wow.
that.
Oh, it's like it makes sense with the dialogue wise, but the just genre, the different genres is pretty impressive that he was able.
Yeah, if your film want to do some film history, I would start with the writer director Billy Wilder
Mhm.
of this movie. Then I would go to Shirley MacLaine, then Fred
Mhm.
MacMurray, then Jack. I would go in that order in terms
Oh,
of
really? Then Fred MacMurray and Jack? Because I haven't heard of Fred MacMurray before. I've heard
Yeah.
of Jack, of course.
Fred MacMurray's been in some classics. He was in Double Indemnity, which is like a film noir classic.
Mm-hmm.
Another Billy Wilder.
Also directed by Billy Wilder. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
And he was in the original, like, what became Flubber. Remember when they remade Flubber? That was a remake
Yeah.
of something
Oh,
called
interesting.
Oh, okay.
Absent-Minded Professor. And then The Apartment, and he was in the original Shaggy Dog. So a lot of these like Disney classics started with
Wow.
Fred MacMurray.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So definitely check it out. Definitely.
Yeah.
You want to learn and also it's entertaining in that like we were talking about, it's not a kind of movie you'd see today and it covers multiple genres.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice the only one black person who had a line in the movie?
Oh no, I
The
didn't.
shoe shine person towards the end.
Sign person. Yeah,
He
Oh
was
my
shining
God.
shoes, Sheldrake shoes. And then, you know, Sheldrake gave him some money. He said, much obliged. And he walked off.
because I noticed like the janitors in the office were not black. Like he
No,
put his
no, no.
bowler hat on one of them.
Yeah.
I was like, wait,
Uh-huh.
from a distance it looks like that could be a black person, but
Yeah.
it wasn't. I like stopped it and slowed it down. I was like, oh, where's the
There's
black
another
person?
deep cut. I think there's a black racist doll in the background of his apartment.
Ooh.
So I see it a few times. The scene where, you know, Sheldrake and Kubelik are first in the apartment and he's kind of, you know, she's crying and she's kind of realizing you're never going to leave your wife. When she doing her close-up as she's crying and talking, you see this doll in a rocking chair behind her, and it clearly has like a dark black face. Like even though it's dark in the apartment, I'm like, this is a black doll. And I have no idea the context of it, but it doesn't look promising.
It's like, why is that?
Why is that
Who
there?
makes that decision? The production is like, we got to have this, blackface doll.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The guy in a single apartment in 1960 has a blackface doll.
he's got to have it.
And don't worry, you could use the one that I have at home.
I just bring by.
I'll just bring it through. Yeah.
Yeah. I got a lot. You guys can keep it. I got a lot.
Oh, you sure you don't want to use mine? Shouts like any other crew member.
Yeah. I got a great one.
I just got mine yesterday.
Yeah, very photogenic on camera. It's beautiful.
So
You
that
want
is,
red lips or no red lips? No.
yeah. How red? That's The Apartment. Classic movie, definitely. Scathing look at society.
Yeah. Overall, I definitely enjoyed the watch because there was a lot to chew on. There was a lot to take in and like break down and have opinions about. So it was a good watch.
Check out Amon. You can check out the New Adventures of Superman on HBO.
My Adventures of Superman. Yeah.
My Adventures with Superman. I gotta get that.
Yeah. No worries.
Or check out Grownish in its final season on Hulu.
Nice.
You can catch me at Bear Cub. Check out my short film, The Last Real Magical Negro, on YouTube.
You can catch me at
Hold on.
You still finished?
I'm still going to subscribe to the podcast and watch Grand Crew on Peacock, and check out Londale at
Londale Jr. Doing stand-up all over LA, doing improv shows. I can't promote. I'm SAG. I'm not promoting any other.
Oh yeah,
Any
everything I
other shows?
promoted.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
We're in the
Yeah.
strike.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Forget the sitcoms. I just promote my short film and the podcast. Those are not WGA. We can promote.
You can promote.
Well,
Yeah.
Does
My
WGA
super-
have that rule?
I think so. On some
Because I've
level.
seen WGA writers promote their writing stuff, and I would get confused. But then I realized, oh yeah, they're not SAG, and SAG specifically has that rule.
Oh yeah, maybe.
I see some writers definitely say like, I can't promote my show
Oh, okay.
as a way to kind of promote their show without promoting their show.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, if it wasn't for the strike, I could tell you I got a show that's airing in July.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if we can't promote any of that, you could catch Londale and me doing Benetton once a month at UCB.
Yeah, check out some improv.
Yeah.
Come through.
Londale has a lot of stand up. He's performing.
It's always
weekly, pretty
performing.
much.
Yeah, killing it.
And you can listen to the pod, and we'll see you guys next time.
Peace.
Or you'll
Peace.
hear us next time. I hate to say see you on a podcast.
I'll hear you later.